Hello and welcome to episode 7 of the My Footballing Journey series. Today I'm joined by Craig Conway, a former player with 500 senior appearances to his name, 7 caps for Scotland, and several club honours. Upon retiring from the beautiful game, Craig moved into the world of intermediary work, and he joins us today to discuss post-football career options, the role of a modern football agent, and much more. Welcome, Craig. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you very much, mate. Appreciate it. Thank you. Happy to be
Awesome.
joining you.
Yeah, it's really good to have you on. This is our seventh episode. We're trying to look at all different aspects of working in football. We've done a lot of stuff behind the scenes at clubs, and I think this is a really interesting one. It's probably something that people know the least about when it comes to the football industry. So I guess we'll kind of start at the beginning of this section of your journey, really, kind of the end of your playing career. I mean, did you know pretty early on that you wanted to go into this side of the game, or did you look at other avenues as well?
No, I did. I have to be honest. I think I knew that I wanted to go into this side. I certainly wanted to stay in football. Um, but I done my B license, I've done my badges and stuff like that. It just didn't really appeal to me, coaching. And still doesn't. I think it was one of the things where all right, you're still in the game and you're on the pitch, but I didn't really relate to me. I think as a player, or certainly I can only speak for myself, but I moved around a lot, moving house and taking the family, and I've got a young family, and my wife, I mean, she followed me everywhere. And I think with coaching, certainly from friends and people that I know that are in the coaching side of things, it's even worse probably because you're little bit less protected in terms of contracts. And you could be here, there, and everywhere. And I just wasn't really. I mean, that's not the only reason, but I obviously tried it in the grass, and there's aspects of it that I enjoyed, but I would probably rather be part of somebody's journey. That's what appealed more to me. And certainly the experience that I had, it's kind of more one-to-one relationships rather than focusing on a team. So yeah, I knew that I wanted to go into this side of game probably from the age of 30, I'd say.
Mm.
And I was luckily enough to have a long career. I played and I retired when I was 36, so I had a good innings, as you say.
Yeah, it's interesting you talk there, good innings. I mean, there's a lot of debate really about when is the right time. You see more and more players dropping down to like a League Two level. We've seen that a lot recently. And obviously yourself with Salford and continuing to play. Some players, obviously choose to retire at a higher level, maybe a little bit earlier. Do you look back and think, yeah, I retired at the right time, or do you think maybe you could have gone earlier or carried on for longer?
I think a lot of it's controlled by your body, Joe, to be honest. Like, I mean, me, when I was at Blackburn, I think I was 34 when I left 2019.
Mm.
Um, and to be honest, I actually had the chance to stay another year. But listen, in hindsight, maybe I should have stayed. But I think I was the type of player that just wanted to play. And you mentioned there a lot of lads will play and they'll go down the levels, and it's not that I wanted to do that. I
Mm.
think just it's just a fact. When you get a little bit older, and I'm not one of these players that I didn't feel as if my legs went. Like people say that, or your legs go. They maybe did, but I certainly didn't notice it as much as a lot of players do. I still felt as if I was. I mean, even at 33, 34, I felt fit.
Mm.
I was still up front with the pre-season and running, and you ask anyone, I was always very fit. And sharp, I felt.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think when I left Blackburn, then I went into Bolton for a bit, and I was meant to sign there. It didn't materialise, and then when I went into Salford, I was just unfortunate with the COVID situation. I was only there for 3 months, and the season got cut short. But
Mm.
even in that time, I felt as if I offered something.
Mm.
And obviously went up and finished in Scotland. But to answer your question about retiring, I think I knew deep down my body was. It's not that my legs had gone; it was just injuries and staying fit
Mm.
was a big thing. I had a problem with my groin that I just couldn't shake off, and
Mm.
I got to the point where I could only maybe train 2 or 3 days a week. And the manager was great with me, Callum Davison. He was really understanding. I was still staying down south near Manchester, which I still stay now. So I was doing a lot of traveling, which
Yeah.
probably didn't help. But I think I knew. I got to the end of that season. I mean, it was an amazing season at St Johnstone. Although there was no fans, we won the two cups. We won the League Cup and the Scottish Cup. So my last game that I was involved in as a professional was a Scottish Cup final, which we won.
Yeah.
But I mean, if I was to get on the pitch, I didn't get on the pitch that game. But to be honest, I probably couldn't. My body was going. My groin. I mean, I could hardly train.
Mm,
But yeah, I was comfortable when I called it a day. I was
mm,
comfortable in my because I think that's important as well for players. You speak to a lot of players and it's almost taken out their hands where you're maybe cut short by a major injury. I was really lucky that
mm.
I got through my career without any real major injuries that really hampered my career. So I felt a bit of comfort in the fact that it was me that decided
Yeah.
and nobody else. Because I probably could have moved on from St Johnstone and maybe come back to League Two or played at a level, but I just didn't think one, it's not fair on my family and keeping it going, and two, probably not fair in the club that I signed to because they would be getting a player that's probably fit for 30% of the season, which me as a person, I couldn't do that.
Mm.
So yeah, I just decided to call it a day, and I was happy with that. And to be honest, I've no regrets. I made the right decision.
Yeah, that's interesting. I want to kind of switch tacks a little bit now and move over to talking about your perceptions of what an agent does, or certainly what you thought an agent did before you became one. Because as a footballer, no doubt you will have had one or had several throughout your career. Were there any differences when you kind of stepped out of one world and into the other to go, oh, okay, there's this involved with this and there's that, and I never realized this? Or were you totally aware of the whole thing when you went into it?
Yeah, I would say, like as you mentioned, as being a player, I had an agent for my full career. And I mean, a lot of the things that I had from my agent, because I had a few different agents early on, and then I had the same agent for the remaining part of my career from probably about the age of 23, something like that.
Mm,
Um, Up until that, I had good and bad experiences, but then after that, from my agent who was for my full career, I learned a lot from him,
mm,
both from football inside and helping me and experience, but probably the kind of mentoring side of things. He was really good for me. So yeah, I kind of knew, I would say 80% of what it takes to be an agent coming out of the game. I think when you come into this side of the game, you see sides of the game that you would never see as a player. But yeah, I would say it was similar to what I expected. I mean, there's I think in any job, both playing, just looking at it from a footballing point of view, I think as a player, a coach, an intermediate, like a scout, anything, there's pros and cons and there's frustrations. It's like any job. But yeah, I'm loving it, and there's a lot more to it than what I thought. It's
mm.
probably more to answer your question. There's a lot of things that I didn't know too much about when I
Yeah.
was playing, but you certainly you get a fast education when you come into it.
Yeah. Do you think there's a lot of, misconceptions with the general public as well in terms of what they see an agent as being, especially with, agents at the top end of the game, the ones that you'll hear about on Sky Sports News on deadline day with your Mbappes and Ronaldos of the world. Do you think that there's misconceptions about what agents actually offer their clients?
100%. And I feel as if I'm qualified to answer that because I've been in both sides of it. I've been a player having an agent, and then I've obviously been an agent on the other side of it. I think what people's perceptions of agents are is like you're a shark and you're just like in it for the money and I mean, listen, I'm not saying that there's not people like that, but the majority of agents are really good for their clients and do the best for their clients. Um, I think what people that are not qualified to have an opinion. I'm not. It's not that so much it's because everyone's entitled to their opinion, but I think what a lot of people see is what goes on behind the scenes. They might just turn on Sky Sports and see this agent turning up on the day. He doesn't realise that there's maybe been a year, 2 years of work that's went into that deal
Mm,
beforehand. and then also looking at the side of the game where you're supporting the player, you're guiding them. I mean, having played, I've got the experience that I've been in their shoes for 20 years. I know what it's like as a player, and there's positives and negative experiences that you go through as a player, because I you would never find a player that's literally from the start of their career, it's just been an upwards curve and it's all been positive. There's always injuries, loss of form, there's all that to bring into it. But for me as a player, in my opinion, you need an agent, because what you've got is, if you're playing in a team with, say, 25, 30 other players, and you've got a manager, the manager, with the greatest respect, he's not got time to just focus on that one player. He's got 30 other players, characters, egos. He's got a lot to do. So an agent for a player, it's a one-on-one mentor relationship agent, whatever you want to call it. You're focusing on that and what's best for them, and that's where I feel there's real value in being able to be in their corner and fight their corner. Because at the end of the day, it's always got to be, it's the player's career. It's not the agent's career. It's the player should always have, or a good agent should always offer the player. It's his decision at the end of the day. As an agent, you can only bring options and opportunities to the table, but the final decision has got to be the player or the coach for that matter, because obviously coaches can have
Yeah.
agents as well.
Yeah, I mean, you touched there on your insight into both sides of that coin. You obviously look after young players now yourself, and you were once a young player coming through. What do you think the biggest differences are now between young players, when you were coming through and young players of 2024?
Well, I mean, the obvious thing is, like, it's probably across everything, not just football, but like you've got the introduction of social media and all I think the opinions are a lot more evident, or a lot more public than what they used to when I was coming through. So young players have got to deal with that.
Mm.
Um, I think as well, I think players are getting younger coming into the first team. And I think there's young players playing in the Premier League at the minute that are babies. Do you know what I mean? They're really young, and a lot of players will maybe see that, and they might be a little bit impatient with their development and where they should be, because you might have a player at, say, I don't know, let's say Blackburn for an example. You might have a player at 18 or 19 comparing himself that's 18 playing with Liverpool's first team. So it's like managing, a lot of it's managing expectations. People develop at different stages. You get some players that are a man at 16. You get some player that are really not developed at all until they're 18, 19. So there's a lot of kind of aspects that come into play that you've got to deal with as an agent, and speak to the player and get that across, and try and help them through that and guide them in the best way that you can.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think, there are definitely differences. Social media that you touched on there is obviously a huge factor in those outside opinions. What kind of advice do you give, especially to younger players, as someone that's been in those positions? I mean, towards the kind of second half of your career, social media will also have been a thing. I mean, did you keep away from it? How did you manage to switch off from that side of things?
I did. I stayed, when I say I stayed away from it, I still obviously had it. I mean, I wouldn't, I probably was the generation that before kind of social media came. So I mean, even now, from a working point of view, it can certainly, there's benefits to it, definitely. Um, I'm probably not the best person. I'm not the most active in social media, but when I was playing, I can only speak about that. I've met players that the first thing they do, they'll go on their Twitter or their Insta, see what people's opinions, and I was just not that person at all. I didn't need validation from somebody that's sitting 300 miles away giving an opinion on how I played, because does it really affect your life or your career? It definitely doesn't. Um, I think the most important thing for a player, there's only really two, maybe three, four opinions that matter in your life and your career. And two that I can certainly come to mind is the manager and yourself more importantly. But I think for me as a player, I didn't need somebody to tell me if I had a good or a bad game, because it works both ways. It's not just about if you had a bad game, what people are saying. It's like when you had a good game, because I guarantee after the best game I've ever had, I would go on and there'd be somebody that had something negative to say.
Mhm.
So I think it's just having a balance. There's a time and a place for it, but I don't think it's certainly something that you can almost use as a validation tool to know if you've played well or not, because
Mm.
it's not important. Like the manager is the one that you need to speak to, and who effectively has control over whether you play or whether you don't play. So yeah, I didn't use it. And even that goes as far as even the newspapers, and probably back in my day when I was
Mm.
younger coming through, it was like the Sun and the Daily Record
Yeah.
up in Scotland and the Mail, whatever, where you would get the ratings and stuff like
Yeah.
that. And probably earlier in my career, I'd be buying the so if I had a good game, I'd be out buying 10
Yeah.
newspapers, and like you realise pretty quickly that it's just an opinion. It is just an opinion, because
Do you
you
think
might buy a
do you think that's
newspaper.
sorry, I was just going to say, do you think that's been replaced a little bit with some of the influx of data analysis? I mean, you obviously see Jamie Carragher on Sky Sports who kind of really push that in the mainstream, but even outside of that, individual people on Twitter, et cetera, that will talk about data. A lot of these team of the weeks that you'll see are created via data platforms. Do you think that players can sometimes seek out positive data regarding themselves as well, in the same light as you say in those newspaper ratings back in your day?
Yeah, I think so. And listen, there's some players or some characters, probably better way of saying it, is that need that validation, and they need an opinion or a bit of a boost in their confidence, and it helps them. I was just the type of person and character that I didn't need that. I didn't need to be told that I'm amazing or you're doing great or you're shit or whatever or you're poor. Or I just didn't need that, because I knew deep down in myself I had a bad game, I knew I had a bad game, and I didn't
Yeah.
need anyone to tell me. Um, and I liked a manager that would be the same, that could be honest with you and say, look, I thought you were poor or whatever. But as long as you had a bit of honesty with that, then I could take it in the chin.
Mm. And just keeping on that note of data analysis, obviously quite relevant within the world of scouting, and we've seen how much of a change there's been in terms of the approaches that teams take and the way that they use data. But I think something that I've noticed coming from the agent side of things is that a lot of the bigger agencies, especially, are starting to use data. We've seen some high profile cases, Romelu Lukaku, who, hired a data analyst to sell himself to a club. How do you feel about the data analysis within the world of agent work and using that to match clients to teams, etc.?
I think it's become part of the game, really. And I
Mm.
can understand why, because it isn't important. I mean, I think probably in the tail end of my career, it became more of a part of the game. And I can completely understand it, because it is. I mean, there's well documented clubs that use it as part of the recruitment, like a major part of it, if not the only part of the recruitment. So there is obviously weight with it. A lot of the teams that I'm speaking about has had success with it.
Mhm.
So I think it's only natural that there's agencies and clubs, scouts, whatever, that they're going to use that, because it is an important tool to use. And a lot of it is and can be accurate. And probably more from a scouting point of view is you can predict what's going to happen and predict the performance of a team or a player. That's probably the value in it.
Mm.
Because obviously, I mean, it's always been readily available for at least for the last 15 years. Google and transfer market, there's a lot of kind of basic stats that you can get from that.
Mhm.
But then obviously there's specialist companies that have got more in depth, like expected goals and all that kind of stuff, that you can use to predict where it's going to go from like I said, from a player or a club. So I completely understand it. And to be honest, I do support it, because it's a really helpful tool.
So, do you have any kind of personal philosophies about the way that you think agents should support their players? Do you have a certain approach? Do you see it in a certain way, maybe that isn't the way that everyone else would see it?
No, I think probably one thing is just a bit of honesty. I think that's what I appreciated as a as a player. I'm certainly not the type of agent that would go with a lot of fluff, like and try and kind of manufacture interest just to impress a player or to boost his ego. I just wouldn't do that. It's certainly not my makeup to do that. I think what I offer is obviously having had the experience. I think that's a big, big thing. Certainly, if it was my son, if I was starting all again, it would be you want somebody to guide you and help you that's been there.
Yeah.
That's just my opinion. I can see the benefit of other types of agents, but that's certainly my own thing is play heavily on the fact that there's very, very little things that you would go through as a player in your career that I've not in some way or other experienced. So I think that's a big part of what I offer. Me certainly, I can obviously only speak for myself.
Mhm.
But yeah, but into like I say, just a bit of honesty, and at the same time that works in both kind of maybe sometimes they need to be told a bit some home truths. I think that's important because I wouldn't like to be the type of agent that just tells them every game they've been amazing, they're the best player, just to inflate their ego. I think there's got to be a bit of realness to it and honesty. So that's definitely something that I try and have because I wouldn't like to look a player in the eye and tell him he's played well when he's not.
Mm.
Um, or vice versa, told him that he's not played well when maybe if I looked at it again, he maybe has. So I think honesty is a big thing for me. That is massive.
Are there any character traits or footballing attributes that you look for when you kind of on that recruitment front for yourself in terms of players that you might represent, especially more thinking about younger players? Is there anything that you're always on the lookout for?
I think I think as an agent or certainly as a former winger, I think you take a liking to similar players or players that play in the position that you played because you can probably give them a bit of real advice or from
Mm.
personal experience, or you're qualified to help them, if you know what I mean, because you've played in that position. So I would probably say that I take a shine into wide players and tens or forwards or whatever because I can kind of relate to them a lot more.
Mm.
Not to say that I don't look at centre halves or goalkeepers or whatever, but I think that's just one thing that I do. Probably the first player that would stick out to me would be somebody that was similar to myself or plays in a similar position. Um, I think character and attitude's a big thing because especially young players, you see a lot of young players that are absolutely excellent technically and really gifted. That's half the battle, like maybe even less. I think for me, attitude um, and resilience is probably more important. I would argue all day long that it's more important. I think from my own point of view, I grew up, I played with better players than me, better technical players, but I probably had a better attitude. I was more resilient. I could take a hit and get back up and dust myself back down. I think that is really important.
Do you
And
think
a
do you
lot of
think
these players,
those traits are less common now than they were then in young players? Do you think that it's quite rare?
maybe, yeah, I think certainly resilience in dealing with hardship. So if you've come through at a top academy,
Mm.
at one of the top, say, four clubs or six clubs in the Premier League in England, you probably not really came across much hardship. I
Mm.
think it's a big test for players that maybe get released from a big club. What they
Mm.
do next is a big, big thing. I think it's really important. Because if they've never had any hardship, they've always been told they've always been the best player in their boys' club team coming through, and then they've went into a nice, shiny academy, and they've had nice food, they've had traveling the best way, they've been staying in the nicest hotels. If they've not had any hardship, it's a real test to how they'll react to that. And I
Mm.
think the ones that react in a positive way to that I would certainly take a shining to them. I think it's a real good a good thing to have as a character and as a player.
Well, that's all we have time for this week on the My Football and Journey series. I'd like to thank Craig for joining us this week. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Joseph. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Awesome. I've been Joe, and I will catch you next time.